The warning alarm screamed through the bridge of the Perseverance as Captain Myra Chun gripped her command chair with white knuckles, her eyes fixed on the flickering navigation display that had just betrayed them all. "Navigation is down," shouted her first officer, a young man named Pavel, whose face had gone pale in the red emergency lighting. "We are dropping out of hyperspace, whether we like it or not." Myra had commanded this ship for 15 years, and she had never heard the old vessel make sounds like this. Groaning metal and shrieking. Systems that seemed to cry out in pain as reality tore at their hull during the uncontrolled exit from faster-than-light travel. The stars returned, with a violent lurch that threw half the bridge crew from their stations and sent loose equipment flying across the deck like missiles. "Report," Myra demanded once the shaking stopped, pulling herself upright and ignoring the blood running from a cut on her forehead. Chief Engineer Tomas Reyes answered from his station, his thick fingers dancing across controls that were older than anyone on this ship. "Engines are stable, but the navigation computer is completely fried. We are stranded until I can rebuild it from spare parts." "Where are we?" asked Myra. Pavel checked his instruments 3 times before answering, because he clearly did not believe what they told him. "The Kepler Expanse, Captain. Uncharted territory. No stations, no colonies, no help for at least 2 weeks, even if we could move." Myra looked out the main viewport at the vast asteroid field that surrounded them. Countless rocks, tumbling slowly through the void in an endless dance that had continued for millions of years without witness. "Send a distress beacon," she ordered. "Someone might pick it up eventually, Captain," said Dr. Yuki Tanaka from the science station, a voice carrying that particular tone she used when she had found something interesting. "You need to see this." Myra walked to the science station and looked at the display, not understanding what she saw at first, because it seemed impossible. "That asteroid." Yuki pointed at one of the larger rocks on the scanner. "It is hollow, and there is a structure inside. A massive structure." "Artificial? Pirates?" asked Pavel nervously. "No." Yuki shook her head. "This reading shows the structure is over 1,500 years old at minimum. It predates the collapse wars." Tomas left his station and joined them, his weathered face showing an expression Myra had never seen on him before, wonder mixed with disbelief. "That is impossible," he whispered. "Nothing human from that era survived." The Valori made sure of that. But the scanners did not lie, and within an hour the Perseverance had limped through a hidden entrance in the asteroid and found itself inside a cavern so vast that their lights could not reach the ceiling before them. Sat a shipyard, not the cramped repair docks that humans use today, purchased at outrageous prices from the Valori consortium who controlled all shipbuilding in the known galaxy. This was something else entirely massive. Construction arms stretched into the darkness like the limbs of sleeping giants, surrounded by platforms and walkways and machinery that had waited in silence for centuries. "It cannot be," Tomas said again. But this time, his voice cracked with emotion. "Captain, do you know what this is?" Myra shook her head. "This is Prometheus Station," he said, "the birthplace of humanity's fleet. Our ancestors built the first faster-than-light ships here before the Valori even had space travel. I thought it was just a legend, a story engineers told each other when they were drunk and feeling sorry about what we had lost." The crew spent hours exploring in breathless silence, walking through corridors that had not felt footsteps in 15 centuries and touching machines whose purpose they could only guess at. Myra found herself standing before a massive window that overlooked the main construction bay, imagining what this place must have looked like when it was alive with workers and sparks and the thunder of creation. Her people had built starships here, not purchased them from aliens who charged prices that kept humanity poor and dependent. built them with their own hands and their own knowledge and their own dreams. Captain, Yuki's voice came through the communicator. You need to come to the central hub immediately. I found something. Myra made her way through the station until she reached a circular room, dominated by a pillar of crystalline storage drives that reached from floor to ceiling. The main database, Yuki explained, her hands trembling as she worked at a console that had somehow retained power through all these years. It is intact, Captain. Everything is here. What do you mean, everything? I mean everything. Yuki turned to face her with tears streaming down her cheeks. Ship designs, engine specifications, reactor blueprints, hull compositions, navigation algorithms. This is the complete technical archive of human starship construction. This is everything our ancestors knew before the Valori took it from us. Tomas arrived in time to hear her words, and he had to lean against the wall because his legs would not hold him. We thought the knowledge was destroyed, he said quietly. We thought it was gone forever. For 1,500 years, we have been buying ships from the consortium because we believed we had forgotten how to make our own. We did not forget. Myra said slowly as understanding dawned. Someone hid it. Someone brought this station here and concealed it because they knew that one day we would need it again. As if in answer to her words, a holographic display flickered to life above the central console, showing a recording that had waited 15 centuries for an audience. A woman appeared, wearing the uniform of an era long dead. Her face tired but determined. If you are watching this, she said, then humanity still lives. We have hidden everything we know because dark times are coming, and the Valori will not stop until they control all of space. But knowledge cannot be killed, only buried. We leave this gift for our children and their children, and all who come after. Remember what we were and become it again. The recording ended and silence filled the room. Then the proximity alarm shattered the moment with its urgent wailing. Captain! Pavel's panicked voice came through the communicator. A Valori patrol ship just entered the system. They are heading directly for us. I think they picked up our distress beacon. Mira looked at her crew, at the impossible treasure they had found, and at the future that had suddenly become both brighter and more dangerous than she had ever imagined. Everyone back to the ship, she ordered. We have work to do. The Valori ship hung in space outside the asteroid like a predator waiting at the mouth of a cave, its sleek hull reflecting starlight in patterns that seemed almost beautiful until you remembered what the consortium had done to earn such wealth. Myra stood on the bridge of the Perseverance and watched the alien vessel through the viewport while her mind raced through options that all seemed to end badly. They have not moved in 6 hours. Pavel reported from his station. They are just watching us. They are waiting for reinforcements, Tomas said grimly. One patrol ship cannot take a station this size, even if it is ancient. They will call for a fleet. Then we use the time we have. Myra decided. Yuki, how much of the database can you download to our systems? Yuki shook her head sadly. The files are massive, Captain. Our computer does not have enough storage for even a fraction of it. We would need weeks just to copy the basic engine designs. Then we learn what we can, and we find another way to save the rest. While Yuki worked at the ancient consoles, Tomas led a team through the stations, lower levels in search of anything they could use to repair their navigation. Systems Myra stayed in the central hub and watched the translation software slowly turn alien symbols into words she could understand. What she read changed everything she thought. She knew about her own species. The records went back over 2,000 years to a time when humanity had just discovered faster than light travel, and the Valori were still a minor species struggling to leave their home system. Humans had built the first great starships, vessels so advanced that other species came from across the galaxy just to see them. The engineers of that era were treated like artists, and their shipyards were temples of creation where impossible dreams became metal and light and power. We were the best. Mira whispered to herself. We taught the galaxy how to fly. But the Valari had watched and learned and waited. They could not match human engineering, so they found another path to dominance. They became merchants and bankers and traders, who slowly wrapped their tentacles around the galactic economy when they finally began building their own ships. They did not try to compete on quality. They competed on price. Cheap vessels flooded the market, sold at losses that the consortium could afford because they controlled the banks that financed everyone else. Human shipyards could not match those prices and stay in business. One by one they closed. The engineers scattered to find other work, and their knowledge began to fade. Then came the manipulation that pushed humanity towards civil war. Myra read accounts of trade routes suddenly blocked and resources mysteriously redirected, and old grudges inflamed by agents who vanished before they could be caught. The collapse wars lasted 30 years and destroyed everything humanity had built. By the time peace returned, the shipyards were rubble, and the engineers were dead, and the Valori stood ready to sell their ships to a species that no longer remembered how to make their own. It was not an accident, Yuki said quietly. She had been reading over Myra's shoulder. They planned this for centuries. They took everything from us and made us forget we ever had it. But someone remembered. Myra pointed at the holographic display where the face of the ancient woman still lingered. Someone saw what was coming and hid this place. Tomas returned from the lower levels with grease on his hands and wonder in his eyes. Captain, you need to see what I found. He led them through corridors and down lift shafts until they reached a massive chamber filled with machines that Myra did not recognize. Automated construction drones, Tomas explained, his voice shaking with excitement. Thousands of them. They have been in hibernation mode for 1,500 years, but their power cells are still charged. Give them raw materials, and they can build anything in the database. You mean they could build a ship? They could build a fleet. Tomas laughed like a man who had just discovered that magic was real. Captain, we are standing in the most advanced shipyard humanity ever created, and it still works. The communicator crackled with Pavel's worried voice. Captain, the Valori ship is hailing us. They want to talk. Myra returned to the Perseverance and opened the communication channel. The alien who appeared on screen had the typical Valori features. Tall and thin with pale blue skin and eyes that held no warmth. Wearing the ornate robes of a consortium overseer, I am Kethril, the alien said in perfectly accented human speech. I represent the interests of the Valori consortium in this sector. You have discovered something that belongs to us. This is a human station, Mira replied coldly. It was built by humans and hidden by humans, and it belongs to humanity. Kethril made a gesture that might have been a smile. A legal argument could be made for that position, I suppose. But legality matters little out here in the void. I am offering you a generous deal, Captain. Surrender the station and all data you have recovered, and my government will pay you enough credits to buy a new ship and live comfortably for the rest of your lives. And if we refuse, then I will be forced to take less pleasant measures. The consortium has maintained peace and stability in this galaxy for 2,000 years. We cannot allow destabilizing technologies to resurface and cause chaos. Myra ended the communication without another word. He called our own history a destabilizing technology. Yuki said with disgust, because it is, Tomas replied, destabilizing to them. If humanity starts building ships again, the consortium loses their monopoly. They lose their power. They lose everything. Myra made a decision that she knew might cost them all their lives. Yuki, can you broadcast the database files on an open channel? Yuki's eyes went wide. I can try, Captain, but the Valori will jam us almost immediately. Then make every second count. Send whatever you can to every human colony in range. Send them our history. Send them the blueprints. Send them proof of what we used to be. The transmission lasted only 4 minutes before Valori jamming shut it down. But in those 4 minutes, fragments of humanity's lost knowledge scattered across 3 star systems, like seeds carried on the wind in 12 different worlds. Humans received pieces of their forgotten heritage and began to remember Kethral's response was immediate and furious. You have made a terrible mistake. His voice thundered through the communication system. Prepare to be boarded. The Valori ship moved toward the asteroid entrance with weapons charging, but Prometheus Station was not as defenseless as it appeared, deep within its ancient heart. Systems that had slept for 15 centuries began to wake. The station shuddered as ancient power generators roared back to life for the first time in 1,500 years, sending vibrations through every corridor and walkway like the heartbeat of a giant waking from a long sleep. Tomas stood at a control panel in the engineering section with his hands flying across buttons and switches that no human had touched since before the collapse wars. The defense grid is coming online. He shouted into his communicator. I have no idea how long it will hold, but we are not going down without a fight. The Valori ship had entered the asteroid and now hung in the massive cavern like an insect invading a cathedral, its weapons glowing with deadly energy. As it prepared to fire, Kethral's voice echoed through every speaker in the station. This is your final warning. Surrender now, and I will spare your lives. Continue this foolishness, and you will all die. Myra's response was to activate the defense systems. Beams of light erupted from hidden emplacements along the cavern walls, striking the Valori ship and sending it spinning wildly as its shields struggled to absorb the unexpected attack. Impossible, Kethral screamed over the communication channel. That technology should not exist anymore. You forgot something about humans. Myra replied as she watched the alien vessel struggle to regain control. We build things to last. The battle that followed was desperate and chaotic. The Valori ship was more advanced and more powerful, but the station's defenses had been designed to protect against entire fleets. And even after 15 centuries of neglect, they still remembered their purpose. Energy beams crisscrossed the cavern in deadly patterns while the alien vessel dodged and weaved and returned fire with everything it had. Sections of the station exploded as Valori weapons found their marks. Ancient machinery dying in flames that had no air to sustain them. We cannot keep this up, Pavel reported from the Perseverance. The defense grid is failing. 3 emplacements are already destroyed, and more are losing power. Myra knew he was right, but she also knew that every minute they held out was another minute for the transmitted data to spread through human space. Somewhere out there, people were receiving those fragments of knowledge. Somewhere engineers were looking at blueprints their ancestors had drawn and feeling something stir in their hearts. Tomas, is there anything else we can do? The engineer's voice was grim. There is one more system I found in the database. Something called the Prometheus Protocol. But Captain, I do not fully understand what it does. Can it help us? It might save the station, but we would lose it. Explain. The protocol is an emergency measure. It activates the station's own faster-than-light drive and jumps the entire asteroid to preset coordinates. The problem is that those coordinates are not in the database. The station could end up anywhere in the galaxy. Myra understood what he was saying. They could save the knowledge, but they would never be able to use it themselves. Another explosion rocked the cavern as the Valori ship destroyed 2 more defense emplacements. Shields are failing. Yuki reported, we have maybe 10 minutes before they can board us. Myra looked at her crew, and these brave people who had stumbled into history and refused to let it slip away again. Prepare the protocol, she ordered Captain. There is something else, Tomas said hesitantly. Someone needs to stay behind to activate it. The controls require manual operation before anyone could respond. Mira felt the Perseverance shudder beneath her feet as something struck the hull. Direct hit to our starboard engine. Pavel shouted. We are losing power. The old ship groaned in pain as more systems failed. And Myra realized with cold clarity that the Perseverance was dying. She had commanded this vessel for 15 years. It had carried her through storms and battles and the long, lonely stretches of space between stars. Now it would carry her one last time. Everyone abandon ship, she ordered. Get to the station and prepare to jump. Captain. No, Pavel protested. That is an order, Myra said firmly. The Perseverance still has enough power to fly and enough weapons to fight. I am going to give that Valerie something to remember us by. Her crew evacuated in the escape pods while Myra took the controls herself, feeling the familiar hum of the old engines beneath her hands. The Valerie ship was turning to pursue the pods when the Perseverance lurched forward with everything. She had left. Catherall saw her coming, but too late. The human vessel slammed into the Valerie ship's engine section with the force of a dying star, tearing through shields and armor and machinery in a cascade of explosions that lit up the cavern like a second sun. Myra was thrown from her chair as the bridge collapsed around her, sparks and flames and twisted metal filling her vision. She thought she heard someone calling her name before darkness took her on the station. Tomas watched the collision through tear-filled eyes. She did it, Yuki whispered. She crippled them. The Valerie ship was spinning out of control. Its engines destroyed, its weapons dark, its crew scrambling to prevent a complete reactor meltdown. We need to go now, Tomas said. Before they recover, he activated the Prometheus protocol and the station began to hum with power that had waited 1,500 years to be released reality. Bent around the asteroid as the ancient faster than light. Drive engaged in the last moment before the jump. Tomas saw something through the viewport that made his heart soar. An escape pod from the Perseverance. Tumbling through the chaos of the battle, someone had survived, but there was no time to retrieve it. The station vanished in a flash of light, taking humanity's greatest treasure to safety in some unknown corner of the galaxy. Behind it, floating in the wreckage of 2 ships, Myra-chan drifted unconscious in her pod while emergency beacons called out to anyone who might be listening. She had given everything to protect knowledge that might never be found again, but across human space, in the fragments that had already been transmitted. That knowledge was beginning to spread. Engineers on a dozen worlds were looking at ancient blueprints and asking questions that had not been asked in 1,500 years. How did our ancestors build these things? Could we do it again? The fire had been lit. Now it only needed to grow. 5 years had passed since the battle at Prometheus Station, and the galaxy had changed in ways that the Valerie Consortium never expected. Myra Chun stood on the observation deck of a station orbiting the frozen moon of Calax 7, watching a ship take shape in the construction. Bay below it was not a beautiful vessel. The hull was rough and uneven where inexperienced workers had struggled with techniques there. Ancestors had mastered centuries ago. The engines were bulky and inefficient compared to the elegant designs in the ancient blueprints, but it was human-built by human hands using human knowledge on human soil, and it was not alone. The reactor team says they will be ready for a test firing tomorrow, reported the young engineer standing beside her. A woman named Sasha, who had been a child when the Perseverance discovered Prometheus Station. Good, Myra nodded. Tell them to take their time and do it right. We have waited 1,500 years for this moment, and we can wait another day to make sure we do not blow ourselves up. Sasha smiled and hurried off to deliver the message. Mira turned back to the viewport and let her thoughts drift to everything that had happened since. She woke up in a hospital bed 3 months after the battle. A trading vessel had found her escape pod drifting in the debris field, barely alive and suffering from injuries that should have killed. The Valari had tried to keep the whole incident quiet, but word had already spread too far to contain. Humanity knew about Prometheus Station. They knew about the transmitted data, and they knew about the captain who had sacrificed her ship to protect their heritage. Mira had become a symbol, whether she wanted to be one or not. Now she traveled between human colonies, coordinating the efforts of thousands of engineers and scientists and workers who were all trying to rebuild what had been lost. It was not easy. Fragments transmitted from Prometheus Station were incomplete and often damaged, forcing researchers to fill in gaps with guesswork, and experimentation mistakes were made, and some of those mistakes cost lives. The Valori did everything they could to stop the movement. Trade sanctions cut off supplies of crucial materials. Embargoes prevented human colonies from doing business with their traditional partners. Accidents destroyed 2 prototype shipyards and killed dozens of workers. Though everyone knew those accidents were not accidents at all, some humans argued that the cost was too high, that they should return to the old way of buying Valari ships and accepting their place in the galaxy. But most refused to go back. They had seen what their ancestors could do, and they wanted to do it again. The door behind Mira opened, and a familiar figure stepped through. His face older and marked with scars from the battle at Prometheus Station. "Tomas," she smiled. "I thought you were on New Carthage." "I was," the engineer replied, embracing her warmly. "But I heard you were coming here, and I wanted to give you the news in person." "What news?" "We did it, Captain," Tomas said with tears forming in his eyes. "The team on New Carthage finished the first hull yesterday. She is ugly as sin and probably leaks atmosphere in a dozen places. But she holds together and she flies." Myra felt something loosen in her chest that she had not realized was tight. "What did you name her?" "Prometheus Rising," Tomas laughed. "What else could we call her?" They stood together watching the workers below while Tomas told her about the maiden voyage. How the ship had trembled and groaned and scared everyone half to death before finally stabilizing and proving that human engineering was not dead after all. "The Valori are worried," he said eventually. "I have contacts who say the consortium is holding emergency meetings every day. They do not know how to stop us without starting a war they are not sure they can win. They could still destroy everything we have built." Myra said quietly. "They could try," Tomas agreed. "But the knowledge is spreading too fast now. We have engineers sharing information across every human colony. We have students learning techniques that were lost for 15 centuries. Even if they destroyed every shipyard we have, they cannot destroy what is in our heads." Communication alert interrupted their conversation. Myra answered it and found herself looking at Dr. Yuki Tanaka, who had established herself as the leading translator of pre-collapse technical documents. "Captain, we have visitors," Yuki said with an expression Myra could not quite read. "A delegation from the Corthan Collective just arrived. They want to talk to you." The Corthans were a species that had suffered under Valori economic domination almost as long as humanity had. "What do they want?" Yuki smiled. "They want to learn how to build ships." Myra and Tomas exchanged glances. "It is starting," Tomas said softly. "Other species are watching what we are doing. They are seeing that the consortium can be challenged. Send them to the conference room." Myra told Yuki. "I will meet them there." The meeting lasted 3 hours, and by the end of it, the Corthans had agreed to share their knowledge of advanced metallurgy in exchange for access to human propulsion. Research. It was the first of many such agreements over. The following months, delegations arrived from 6 different species, all of them tired of paying Valori prices, and all of them eager to learn the secrets that humanity was rediscovering. Myra found herself not just coordinating human efforts, but building an alliance of species who wanted to break free from consortium control. You know what the Valori will do when they realize what is happening. Tomas warned her one evening. Yes, she replied, but that is a problem for tomorrow. Today we keep building, and they died in Calyx 7. The reactor finally fired successfully on New Carthage, the Prometheus. Rising completed her first cargo run on a dozen other worlds. Humans and their new allies worked side by side, learning and teaching and creating things that the galaxy had not seen in 1,500 years. The embers had become flames, and the flames were spreading faster than anyone could put them out. 20 years after the discovery of Prometheus Station, the galaxy had transformed beyond recognition, and the Valori Consortium faced something they had not experienced in 2,000 years of dominance. Genuine competition. Admiral Myra Chun stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Perseverance II, watching the stars stream past as the vessel cruised through hyperspace at speeds that would have seemed impossible. To her younger self, her hair had gone gray at the temples, and her face carried lines that spoke of decades of struggle. But her eyes still held the same fire that had driven her to ram her ship into a Valori patrol vessel all those years ago. Admiral, we are approaching the rendezvous coordinates, her first officer reported. Thank you, Commander. Bring us out of hyperspace and hold position. The star solidified into fixed points of light as the Perseverance II dropped back into normal space, and Myra felt her breath catch at the sight that greeted her. Ships filled the void in every direction. Human ships, Corthan ships, vessels from the Minari Federation, and the Tesh Collective, and a dozen other species who had joined the Alliance over the past 2 decades. They had gathered to witness something historic. The delegation from the Valori Consortium is requesting permission to approach. The communications officer announced. Granted, Myra said. Escort them to the main hangar. She made her way through the corridors of her ship, nodding to crew members who snapped to attention as she passed. The Perseverance II was the finest vessel humanity had ever built, a triumph of engineering that represented everything her people had reclaimed from the ashes of history. But she was not unique. Human shipyards now produced hundreds of vessels every year, trading them to species across the galaxy at prices the Valori could not match. More importantly, they shared their knowledge freely. Engineering academies on human worlds welcomed students from every species, teaching techniques that had been hoarded secrets for millennia. The monopoly was broken. The galaxy was free. Mira reached the hangar just as the Valori shuttle touched down, its sleek hull a stark contrast to the functional design of the human vessel surrounding it. The figure who emerged was familiar. Despite the decades that had passed, Overseer Catherall walked with the slow, careful steps of someone who had grown old. His pale blue skin faded, and his once proud bearing diminished by the weight of years. He approached Mira and stopped a respectful distance. Away, Admiral Chun, he said. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me. I almost did not, Myra replied honestly. After everything the Consortium did to stop us, you have no right to ask anything of humanity. I know. Catherall bowed his head. I did not come to ask. I came to understand. He looked around at the ships filling the viewport, at the evidence of humanity's resurrection as a spacefaring power. Why? He asked finally. You had every reason to become what we were. You could have hoarded your knowledge and dominated the galaxy as we did. You would have been justified after what we did to you. But instead you gave it away freely. You taught your enemies how to compete with you. Why? Myra considered the question carefully. She thought about the captain of the Perseverance, the woman she had been before discovering Prometheus Station, buying fuel and parts from Valari merchants because there was no other choice. She thought about the countless human generations who had lived and died under the weight of that dependency, never knowing that their ancestors had once built the greatest ships in the galaxy. She thought about her crew, scattered now across human space, teaching and building and creating a future that they had almost lost forever. Because we remember what it felt like, she said at last, to have our future in someone else's hands, to depend on those who saw us as customers rather than equals, to know that we were capable of more but could not reach it because someone else had taken that possibility away. She met Cathral's ancient eyes without anger or hatred, only a calm certainty that had taken her 20 years to find. We will not do that to others. She continued, we will not become you. That is not who we want to be. Cathral was silent for a long moment. We thought we were building an empire that would last forever, he said quietly. We thought that controlling the means of travel meant controlling everything. We were wrong. You have shown the galaxy that there's another way. The galaxy showed itself, Mira corrected him. We just reminded people what was possible. The old alien nodded slowly. I am the last of the overseers who ordered the suppression of your knowledge, he said. The others are dead or retired. The young ones in the consortium want to adapt, to find a new place in a galaxy that no longer needs us to build their ships. I wanted to see for myself what we failed to destroy before I joined my predecessors in history. He looked once more at the fleet assembled outside. You have built something remarkable, Admiral. Not just ships, but hope. I wonder if we ever could have done the same. You still can, Myra said. The academies are open to everyone, including Valori. It is never too late to change. Cathral made the gesture that might have been a smile. Perhaps. But that is for the young to decide. I am too old to learn new ways. He returned to his shuttle and departed without another word, leaving Myra alone with her thoughts. Later that day she attended the ceremony she had come to witness. Prometheus Station had finally been found after 20 years of searching. A survey team had discovered the ancient shipyard drifting in an uncharted system on the far edge of the galaxy. Its systems still functioning, its database still intact. Now it was coming home. Myra stood in the observation lounge of her ship as the massive asteroid emerged from hyperspace. Surrounded by an escort of vessels from every species in the Alliance, Tomas Reyes was beside her. His hair silver now, but his eyes still bright with the wonder of an engineer who had never stopped believing in the impossible. We found it, he whispered. After everything, we actually found it. The people who hid it knew we would, Myra replied. They had faith in us. The ceremony was simple but profound. Engineers from 12 different species gathered in the station's central hub, where the ancient woman's hologram still waited, her message playing once more for an audience that had finally earned the right to hear it. Remember what we were and become it again. They had not just become it, but surpassed it. The shipyards of humanity now produced vessels more advanced than anything that original Prometheus engineers had imagined, incorporating knowledge from a dozen species who had chosen to share rather than hoard. It was not perfect. There were still conflicts and disagreements, and the Valari still controlled vast economic networks. That would take generations to dismantle, but the future was no longer in someone else's hands. Mira found herself standing before the recovered hull of the original Perseverance, salvaged from the debris field where she had nearly died and restored as a monument to what had been sacrificed. Tomas joined her there. What are you thinking? He asked. Myra touched the old metal, feeling the scars and patches that told the story of a ship that had given everything for its crew. I'm thinking about the people who built this station, she said. They could not have known if anyone would ever find it. They hid our heritage on faith alone, believing that someday their descendants would be ready to reclaim it. She turned to watch the young engineers moving through the station, their faces bright with excitement as they explored the birthplace of humanity's starfaring legacy. We owe them more than we can ever repay, she continued. But I think the best way to honor them is to keep doing what they did. Building, teaching, hoping. Tomas nodded. The work never ends. No, Myra agreed, watching the future take shape around her. But that is what makes it worthwhile, outside and shipyards across the galaxy, in academies and workshops and construction bays on 1,000 different worlds. The work continued. Humanity had remembered not just how to build ships, but why it mattered to build them at all, and in remembering, they had become something greater than they had ever been before.